one thing that you'll hear people that practice in this area a lot tell you is you've got to make your application package appealing to look at, because the officer is not going to want to have like 1,000 pages of text. Like, give them some graphics, incorporate it into your letter. Those are the type of things we do to try to make them engaged with the application. Because if they're bored by page 2, I think your client is out of luck.
Yeah, there's so much a human factor. Like I've had other clients bring in like denied cases and stuff, and the lawyer hadn't done a bad job, but as soon as I look at it, it's just like all these words, just paragraph, and I'm like, I don't want to even read it. It's like we have enough on our mind. So a lot of it is psychological. Like when I even do marriage cases, I like to put like, color photos of the couple together, really sweet, that gets an emotional pull to really just sell them this is a real couple. It's not selling, just let them, be persuaded to reality. But that stuff plays so much of a role. Even our cover letters, which usually get like discarded in a lot of cases or put at the end, it's every piece has to be beauty. Kind of like, they say Steve Jobs or Mac. Like even if you open up the computer, a part where most of us never see, it's supposed to be designed beautifully, the back, the front, and we got to do that. It's more time, but that helps out approval. Every little 1% you could add to approval, you got to do it. I used to paginate everything because that, it kind of, was cleaner and it specifically said where things are. And one page got lost in the mailroom. Well, no. But then it came too much for my marriage cases where I'm like, it didn't make that much difference. So I stopped. For L's at the end, I do by hand, which takes forever. When I pause that, it was just taking too long. But sometimes when there's a lot of evidence, you got to kind of, have it there so we can reference it later when they claim that we didn't send it. But it's case by case basis and how smooth the thing flows. My L's have so much evidence that it's a mess. It's hard to figure out what's going on. So I kind of have to have sort of system. O1s, the criteria is a little more, clean and it's kind of fun reading them, especially if they're artists and stuff, because it's more interesting as opposed to L's where it's just a bunch of technical documents and this and that. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the most important things that any immigration lawyer can ever do is go to at least 1 or 2 marriage-based interviews, like the in-person interviews.
Yeah.
Because it's at that moment that you see the physical file, especially if it's one that you prepared like many months ago. And then all of a sudden you're sitting in the office and you realize that thing that you shipped to the lockbox in Chicago somehow like got routed all the way back to the field office in downtown LA. And you see it and you realize like it's just a bunch of paper. And I think they remove anything like the tabs that are on the side. I think they get thrown out because they don't have a good way to keep them in the folder. But I think it helps you to really appreciate like what the officer has to try to sort through when you send them 300 or more pages of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I stopped using tabs. Some people use like color pages in between. I don't bother with that, but it is a lot of paper and it's overwhelming. And sometimes, because I send bona fides at the beginning and they'll reference like a lease agreement and we didn't bring it because it's already in there. It's like, well, I don't see it. And he has to like flip through this, like this much paper because it could be their old files for naturalization, for example. They have the I-485, they have the I-7, there's all these papers. So flipping through it becomes like a mess. Luckily, they go through it. What I've seen with marriage cases, though, is sometimes we'll go into downtown LA and it'll take like an hour and a half for them to call us in. And sometimes they call us in immediately. The ones that take an hour and a half, they're flipping through and learning the file before we walk in. Because I've had it even as recently as like a couple weeks ago where they call us in really fast. Like, oh, great. As soon as they came, they call us in. And then the officer had to sit there for 25 minutes just flipping through and reading it. I'm like, well, it's kind of awkward. Why don't you just sit outside? Because like clients are freaking out. Why are they not asking any questions? Just sitting here. I'm like, well, they decided to review it with you, but whatever. They're just looking at it one by one, and the interview went by smooth and it was complete. But it's they got to look over this stuff, and they don't have much time to look over it. So a lot of time it's right then, just flipping through it to make sure everything is there.
Yeah, and so we don't really get an opportunity to see what happens at the service centers that are looking at these I-129 petitions, but I have to imagine it's kind of the same. Although I understand a lot of them are working from home right now, but still, it's like they're going to have a big stack of paper that they've got they've got some checklist that they're trying to make sure that all the minimum stuff is met. But then at the same time, they're trying to decide, does it seem like an approvable case? Mm-hmm. I think we've all seen the situation where we can tell that what they did is they decided it's not approvable. And then they worked backwards to come up with some reasons why.
Yeah.
And that's when you get those boilerplate RFEs or decisions. It's frustrating, right? Because we put so much effort into putting these cases together, and it seems like they just cherry pick what they want to look at.
They'll go through it and find like one sentence that's like a little bit off, or it's like a typo. I'm like, well, you said this, that means it's wrong or something like that. Like I have one marriage case where they came to me with annoyed and responded, and the case ended up getting denied. And one of the major things was like, I should word it without the client getting to it. Like their friend had written a letter saying, oh, they came to my house because the inspector or the person working on the house, the contractor, had taken out one of the walls and the roof had collapsed, and it was like a mess. So that day the couple came to help them as evidence of their couple, blah, blah. And in like there were a couple of people there. One person said, yeah, I was at their house when they took out that supporting wall and the wall collapsed. And so they just use the word wall twice, not roof. But obviously, if you take out a wall and the wall collapsed, obviously it's a typo. But they're like, well, one person said the wall collapsed after they took out the wall. One person said the roof collapsed. This is we can't square these together. They're being dishonest. I'm like, really? Like, are really gonna? That's what you're gonna pinpoint? And all the evidence we submitted, they all said this. We sent them like 200 pages of joint documents. Like, these are not persuasive. I'm like, one sentence took hours and hours, like 10 hours of work. Just one sentence is out. So it's a shame when it's like that. But that's kind of, that case goes to show you need to have a lawyer from the beginning, because they did on their own. It kind of like went downhill from there just because of the way they filled it out. But the same with O's. A lot of people, go to paralegals or they do it themselves, and that means varying level of success. But there's just so much that could easily go wrong. As you're really having someone who does this all day and is really focused on this is key.
And we actually got some cases that other people were like started working with, and then it was just because it's so, I mean, specific. And I come from like an entertainment background, which makes it very easier to navigate the petitions and understand the terms of the industry and whatnot. But we got cases from other people that just it was, I mean, the clients were not satisfied with that type of work, and it kind of relates to what you were saying. It's just I mean, tons of evidence. You have really to understand the work of the client. And truth is, it's not very easy to understand what entertainers do, even though it sounds that kind of easy, but in truth, like the actual practice and career is intricate.
Yeah, and a lot of the arts entertainment is changing right now with how the internet works, and so a lot of the old ways of showing someone being big is different, whether it's on YouTube or at the podcast or something like that.